It is Maggie and Urvi back for a duo episode, which, if you have been with us thus far this season, you will see that we have a lot more guests and a little less of just Maggie and I. But we are here for a duo episode again and totally excited to do it. Um, so, Maggie, we have so many things that have kind of been happening in our lives since our January, 2023 reflections and 2024 intentions duo, which was a few months ago. So, what are you noticing right now? Like, tell us about the season you're in. Tell us about what you are navigating.
Well,
That's a
even
big,
if it's a big one, especially because you're like behind the scenes, so there's a lot I could say to that. But I that even hearing you mention that January episode feels like another life. Like I don't like this year has been what is it, April? I don't even it has
yeah,
been a lot.
it's
It's been a lot. I don't even know the date. I'm still in Bali. I've been traveling since January 9th. So I was in India, Sri Lanka, and now Bali. So that was the start to my year. Um, there's a lot I could say, but I do want to acknowledge that I'm really excited to be doing a duo episode with you.
I
And
know.
yeah, and I think this year is one of I turned 36 in January, and I've been living this nomadic life for like 2-ish years now, like almost exactly 2 years. I've been
Mhm.
like not having a steady apartment, kind of like traveling out of the States, coming back to the States, and just sort of roaming around. And it's a very different and interesting way to live. And with that comes a lot of experiences, right? Like I've met so many new people in the past 2 years that I didn't know existed. I've learned like new practices, new tools. Like I've been on this like deep dive spiritually, which you and I spoke like when we were coming together to think about how we wanted the season to go, we were like, okay, you have this kind of thing that you're on. Like for me, it was like spirituality, and you were like, I want to bring in stories of women of color. Like there's like these two different things that are like deeper interests of ours, and we were kind of like, how do we make these work? And the point I'm at now with spirituality is like, I am over it. I went down
Oh
this
my God. I was not even expecting you to say that. I had to like pause for a second. Because one, I'm gonna challenge that. Like you are not over
yeah,
spirituality, but you're over something about it, which I think you're gonna talk more to. But I feel like part of our role in the world is to make sure we
yeah,
know like oneness, like our message resonates. It's like it's oneness and like about knowing like everything is contained within you to do what you need to do. And that's like the spirituality that we honor. But I
yeah.
think that's what you're not like over that. You're just over
No,
what
that's
specifically
the
on it.
existence is like I've come to my own belief system, right? Like, and the reason I went down this like spiritual rabbit hole was because like when I started to question like what the universe is made of and like what is existence, and it's like oh, like there's energy. It's everywhere. We've had guests on that speak to this,
Mm,
but there's a universal intelligence, right? Like there is a force, if you will. Like there is a source, there is a force, there is just like this all that is energy that when you tap into it, it'll change completely changes your reality, changes your life. And so I was like, I have to understand this, like I have to understand what this is. And so, anyways, but the deeper you go, like, the less sense anything makes. And the more you recognize that it's just, there's so many tools and theories and ideas and like different worlds that exist within this umbrella of wellness in general. Like you and I talk a lot about these things, but there's so much bypassing of the human experience. And like there's a saying which is like we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And that resonates with me. Like I agree with what that means. But like the key point there is that like is the human experience, right? And what does the human experience mean? And so the past 2 years for me have been trying to like understand like up there, like the ethers and like spirit guides and let me connect and let me move energy, let me do all this stuff. And in that process, I what I thought I was doing. So this is, I don't have like the language for this yet, but I was moving further away from myself in some ways. Like I
Mm,
was like chasing something, like seeking something outside of myself, um, in a lot of ways in that process of like, I want to connect to source. Like I want to be able to, like you've heard me say like I want to be able to talk to spirit guides because then they can help other, I had all these ideas of like where this would take me and what it would lead to that would end up helping me and helping other people, but it was off track. And I think sometimes like that's life though, like whatever, that is life. But in a lot of ways it was taking me further from myself because I still had this idea that there was something all encompassing outside of me that was going to like be the key to my own self discovery and my own self knowledge. And these spiritual like pockets encourage that in so many subtle ways, right? Like there's so many subtle ways that like these kinds of tools like reinforce this idea that there is like a higher intelligence outside of you that's gonna like, it's like this God fearing thing, right? Like there's just like this God fearing attitude, I think, to a lot of spirituality. And maybe that's just like my Catholic background, but it's like there's a right and there's a wrong, and that there's a yeah, like there's some being that knows better than you. There's some being that can tell you something that you don't already know. So anyways,
mm,
and there's lots of stories that have led me to that conclusion, but I had a really hard experience that like really rattled that reality for me, which was like trusting the wrong people, trusting the wrong situations. And but it also led me to like one of the greatest lessons I've learned to date, which is like my own power and what does it mean to be in your own power and to be trusting yourself. So that's kind of where I'm at. So when I say I'm over the world of spirituality, it's more just like there are things that we can learn and that we can utilize in this world that can enhance the human experience. Like they can enhance your reality. They can deepen your trust in yourself. Like they can deepen your creativity. Like they can deepen your fullness and your aliveness. Like that's the balance there of like what I want to move forward with and using the spiritual nature of just the world is to just enhance the human experience, right? And that in some ways I was like saying I was doing that, but I wasn't. Like there was always this chase, like there was always this search that I was hungry for. And I'm always hungry for knowledge. Like that's different though. Like that hungry for knowledge is one thing. Like hungry for experience and like life and like living fully, like that's beautiful. That's great. But like hungry for answers or direction or yeah, like something else that was gonna like tell me or show me what I needed to be doing. Like I was just outsourcing my own power in that way. And so the conclusions I've come to now, which I'm really integrating as I like still spend time here in Bali, which is like fairy tale land in some ways, is is that empowerment piece. Like what does it mean to walk through the world trusting yourself? Like what does it mean to really know that like everything is within you? Like what does that mean to be a person, you know, moving through the world in that way? And how do you do that? And how do you embody that? And how do you just deepen and deepen and deepen that trust and knowing in yourself? And so that's where I'm at in life right
yeah. I mean, I feel as though when we first met and when we launched the podcast last January 2023, I mean, I feel like all I was saying is like, I've done the spiritual work and right now I want to have the human experience. I remember saying, like, I think you and I talked about it deeply where I was like, I am in integration mode. Everything I have gained in terms of knowledge, I want to now funnel through my humanness. It does, like, I was feeling really lost, even though I was feeling found. Like, I was feeling really lost in that I felt found myself spiritually. I felt grow spiritually. I felt my spirit was enlivened. And clearly that's through my humanness that I felt that, right? Because like my spirit is like always been alive. But
now.
I'm like, so when I say I found that, it's the human in me that found that spirit element, right? But what was then occurring for me is like I was either feeling like I was living in two places. Like I was either like living really in my spiritual zone, or I was like living very much like a human thing. And I was like, that doesn't make sense because like this needs to be integrated. Like I want the relationship between my highest intelligence, which is within me, to be, accessible and apparent to like my human day-to-day life, like my physical like being. And I'm like touching my body for those who can't see. It's like I wanted that every molecule of me that like takes form in all the ways that it does in my energy body and my physical body. I wanted it to be synchronized. I wanted it to be harmonious. I wanted it to be integrated. Whatever word you want to use there was like really important. So like I absolutely, like I love using that framework of like honestly like we think we're humans having a spiritual existence, but rather we're spirits having a human existence. And I love that because for me it has been in the last year especially given me permission to sometimes turn off the faucet of like acquiring knowledge and rather sit in the living, and sit in the being and sit in the integration. And I will say what I have gained, and I know I've talked about it like through last year's episodes, but like what I've gained and what I'm seeing you navigate right now is what I can see like the beauty of it, because I feel like I did it in a different way. Both of us had different triggers. Both of us had different, whys of why this lesson had to be learned. So that is not same or necessarily even, parallel. I guess we're just running parallel paths, but like we're not in the same containers around it. But what I would say is like the beauty in it, and I can see it culminating for you in a certain way, is that I have never profoundly trusted timing, right? Like for me, what I've seen now is like timing it, right? Like there's no linearity to it. Like there is contribution. So like the difference between like, I would say like the people that says like, I'll just trust in timing and it'll just fall into place. I don't agree with that. I would agree with like, I trust in timing that as I contribute to the making and the creation of what I want to occur, the time does unfold as it should. So like, and I can only say that because there's evidence for me in my life and I've taken note of that evidence. I won't say that like is true for anybody else. Again, like we're not here about the formula for it all, but like we're here about the subtle noticing and the nuance of like how things occur. And I will say like now, is it an exercise and a practice every single day? Or maybe not every day, but like very regularly to remind myself that that's true. 100%. Like, remember you trust in timing, remember the evidence. And I'll go there sometimes when I'm feeling like doubt there, right? But that is something that in the integration period, in being a spirit, having a human existence, I have given myself permission to trust in the timing and then deeply embed that inside of me. I trusted in like, have fun. Joy is good. If you just have fun, if you just chase a little bit more, and I know everyone is not as privileged maybe as me in the season and the phase I am in life to have fun in the way that I might be having it. So again, it's not the formula, but it's like, where can I institute more joy and fun? And in that, how does my spirit like fill, right? And then like, how does it then reinforce? Like it's a cycle, reinforce me again and again and again in like the contributions I make every day to the impact I want to have. And I will say the third, like there's so many ways, but another way I've seen it kind of really manifest for me in like being able to integrate and just be a human and not sit so much in like purely spiritual containers. And like, then what I would say the subtlety, like the point you're saying, where it's like the subtlety of the bypassery, the spiritual bypassery that exists, that if you're not really on it, like your pulse is not on it, you're like totally soaking up those messages and reinforcing like self-doubt, in a way. And I would say like the externalization of your power is a reinforcement of self-doubt. You know what I mean? Like going out there and saying, oh yeah, like I need to be anointed in any way to have any, spiritual reckoning, growth, ascension, leveling, higher frequency. Like when we do that, like we would, we're not like back to that trusting of yourself. And so like my way to do that was to kind of say like, okay, I'm going to like take some time off from this. Like I'm going to take some time off from like participating in certain containers in certain ways so that honestly, I didn't have to spend the time making sure that I was safe, if that makes sense. Like it was safe and it was also unsafe in the subtleties of like ingraining things in me and perpetuating a path. So like I was almost protecting myself by saying, I'm gonna pass for right now. And I definitely like pulled myself out of certain containers just to like honor having that human experience, because I was like, it was becoming too hard, But then what I have realized is the tools that I have had and the ways that I have created self-trust through those other exposures, I can still bring back within me when I need them.
Yeah. And that's the point, right? Is like to learn. It's just about enhancing the human experience because the human experience is a holy experience. Like there is no difference, right? Like we are holy. And I want like the tools are wonderful and it's still a huge, huge belief and goal of mine to help other people connect
Mm-hmm.
to that to faith in some way, to understanding that there is this push pull, like you said, like between like timing, right? Like trusting, like it's kind of like you take one step, the universe will take 10 steps towards you. Like that's what I believe. Like so when you're talking about timing, that's kind of a part of it. Like you can't just sit back and expect things to come to you, but like if you take, it doesn't take much to set things in motion for yourself. Like if you are taking aligned, actionable steps towards whatever it may be, like the universe meets you. Like it comes, like it does. Like there is this, um, there's a dynamic, there's a relationship between you and the world around you. So understanding that, like I do, like understanding the energetics of that, how to harness that, like for sure enhances your human experience. So like big on that for people. Like I would love to help more people connect in that way. But there are a lot of like I would say unsafe containers because um there just are. So being discerning around, and yeah, like learning for sure. Like balancing like learning and taking in wisdom, but filtering it through your own internal knowing system at all times and never, it's gonna be like not a lecture, but just never believing that somebody or something else knows better than you. Like,
Well, yeah. And like I would say so like we're talking specifically about like the spiritual container, right? Like, or the spiritual
yeah,
like seeking. And
yeah,
there's other things. Like I would say like I'm on a health seeking journey, right? And like not for I don't have anything. I mean, I've had little things that have like shown me I need to focus on that. I don't fortunately have anything like massive that happened, but in thinking about like how I need to make sure I'm looking at my health, that is true too in the health like seeking world, right? Like the wellness, like thinking about what's safe and what's not. And like really, because there's so much information, there's a lot of unsafe things for when you go to the individual level, right? Like they're not necessarily what they're sharing is not unsafe. But when you as a person that tries to apply it, it can be unsafe for you, right? Like
yeah,
that's why there's always like the warnings, right? Like you got to know like what's your health state in order to participate. But oftentimes it's like, we're just wanting to do these like fad things or these like, and I would put like fad health, not even fad diets. I feel like fad diets has evolved to like fad health trends, like fad whatever that's called, and we just buy in, right? And we buy in because it looks like, yeah, great. Like you can buy in for so many reasons. And I would say like we all buy in for those reasons. It's the same reason why we buy into a spiritual container as we buy into a health container, as we buy into like,
mm,
honestly, like choosing a college is buying into something, right? Like everything has that. And the discernment is so critical. And the recognition of like always, and I hate to say it this way because I feel like it's like more work. And I'm not trying to make it more work, but I'm trying to say like, when you're in these places and you sign up for something, you sign up yourself to do something. And I use the word container loosely, like container could be like a group of people, it could be a way of practice, it could be like a protocol, you know what I mean? Like whatever that container looks like, I would say like always have two sides of you there. Like always have the part of you that like is engaging and understanding and seeking, and then the other part of you that's discerning and that's like inquisitive, not from like a negative perspective, but that's always like honoring like safety for you and like what information you're taking, and trust the instinct when it says that piece is not for me.
Yeah, completely.
And if the
Yeah,
container can't hold you when you say that piece is not for me, then likely that's a bigger call to recognize that maybe that's not the container
it's
for you.
not for you. Yeah. And that's like trial by fire, trial and error. Like it's a there's a bit of doing in that. Like you and I, like we remain very curious people. Like we're not sitting here saying like, oh, we're like we are very curious and we like to learn and try new things. And so there's an element of like there's a lot of things we've learned. Like there's two sides to it too. Like there's a lot we've learned like individually from going in and signing up and trying all the things. Like we've learned a lot. And there always is two parts to it though. Like it's a being discerning within yourself because recognizing that there's no perfect thing. Okay. So like
Mm-hmm.
there may be things that you it's like the grayness of life, right? You will learn something and then you may have like a terrible experience at the same time. Like, like there's just this again, it's the nuance, it's the grayness, it's like there's going to be that in anything that you do. So that's another piece of it. Like don't let it stop you either. Like because I think some people resist any sort of teaching because they're like they just don't trust period, but I would say if there's something you're curious about or drawn to, like I still encourage people to try the thing and do the thing, but do it with knowing that there's going to be some things that rub you the wrong way. There's going to be some things that just like you said aren't for you, but overall you will take something away from it, even if it's just that was total BS and I'm never like I know that this isn't for me. Like that's still like there's still an important lesson in it for you. So all in all, like it all, and this is kind of again, like I'm still processing a lot of things I've just recently gone through, but it's like kind of blown my mind in different ways of like light and dark, like light and shadow, like really being able to hold the fullness of light is of life is always holding both of those things. So like there's the part of you that's curious and discerning, and there's the part of you that's open, right? There's going to be parts of everything that are I don't want to say good and bad, but they're just like is like and like that is to me has been like the bigger like this is just life, and we're so quick to be want to be able to label or assign meaning to it in one way or another, but any of these containers, whatever you want to call them, like they all encompass both of those things, if that makes sense. So like that's something that I've been like also like noticing or sitting with is just like life is just gray. Like and I know I say it, but then you have these experiences and some of them you really can't make any sense of because you're like, I learned a lot, but this was insane. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, this is just a life, I guess. Like how do I even make sense of something? So anyway.
I guess it's like all parts are contained within the whole, right? Like that's kind of what you're and I think it's like actually interesting when you were speaking about that. I'm like, isn't that even like the journey of our own podcast, right? Like we like even in this podcast, like Maggie and I really had a moment, right? Like we saw kind of like the space we were creating and then also the value of transformational stories and the courage to like show up to your story and live it. You know what I mean? And I think that's what this like relaunch has been really around, and our episodes in this time are really centered around are these like this courage to be oneself and this courage to like tell these transformational stories rather than only focus on the tool, right? And so this is almost is like a beautiful moment of it all like kind of collapsing into itself where it's like we even all saw ourselves we love every aspect of like last year and the podcast and all of those episodes, and I would highly recommend everyone listening to them. They're still in the space of like noticing this nuance and not the formulaic ways, and how can we leverage the things we learn, how can we leverage the tools that exist in order for us to deepen our impact and deepen the life that we're having and living. And now we're also telling that story, but we're sharing it through like these incredibly powerful stories of like showing up, holding all of that, holding all of your like holding all of your wholeness, like as you're saying, like showing the parts of you that are great and the parts of you that struggle, and like I think it is completely amplified in the stories and the people and the guests that have come through the show recently, right? Like that are just that power of I'm just thinking back to like some of these stories that we were able to be in conversation about, and I'm like, isn't it was all that. It was all like this part was bad, but also this part was good. And
Mm-hmm.
look how this part contributed to good. And look how this also sometimes had a relationship to the bad. And like, that's the story. That's the courage, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, the yin and yang of life, right? And I think that it's the biggest. And tell me what you think about this quote, because I've been, Marianne Williamson, or people love to quote her thing around like, it's not our darkness we're afraid of, but it's our light. Like she has some quote around that. Do you
Mm.
remember? And
I think you're the one who's told me about that quote. I haven't really seen it myself.
I just disagree. I think everyone's running around afraid of the dark. Like I mean, maybe we're just afraid of the human experience in general, but I'm like, everyone is so, at least in a lot of the ways I've seen, like just afraid of the dark, like afraid of the yeah, like the trueness of their themselves, of the fact that like you don't get joy without, you know, pain or sadness. Like you don't get to be like nice without sometimes being mean. Like you don't get to be those things. And it's just this continuous denial of shadow that exists within the human and the human race, of like anyone who's behaving in a way that makes one uncomfortable is bad or wrong or labeled. Like there's just so many ways we continue to think that like shadow or dark shouldn't exist. It's like all of these conversations like on the public forum where it's about how it's like what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. And it just is though. Like you don't get one without the other. So like you don't,
Well,
you know.
yeah. Well, you don't, and I think she's saying the same thing, but she's just saying it from a different,
Yeah,
like
yeah. She's saying it in a
she's
different way.
basically saying like, I would say, her, that quote saying her, or Marianne was saying like, we're not afraid of the dark, we're afraid of the light, is like us saying like we're afraid of our potential, right? Like, and a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
are. People are afraid of
Yeah, they
success.
are.
People are afraid of like taking a risk for it to turn out well. And so we think that's characterized as fear and that's dark, but actually that's like the fear of your courage, right? Like, so
Yeah.
like courage is not the absence of fear. It's like the overcoming. It's like the fear. It's like, it's in tandem with fear. It's when you don't have courage without fear. Like
Right.
there'd be no need. And so, and that fear has different levels and different shapes and different, magnitude at different points in our lives. And it's like the point being that I would say that the way we're normed and socialized and conditioned is like, you're right. I think we're afraid of our darkness, right? Like we're afraid of the dark spots. We're afraid of the things we're bad at. We're afraid at changing. And I think that's constituted with also change, like the fear of change, the idea that like things could be different if I made them different, right? And the light is if I made them different.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like if I took the steps, like that's
Yeah.
light. Like the
Yeah.
steps to do something differently
Yeah.
is you being in your light. But I think that's what that means. You're fearful of that, right? Because like nothing happened by sitting in this chair and saying, I wish it would be different. It requires
Mm-hmm.
even the tiniest of baby steps. And
Yeah.
honestly, it is only that, right? Like it's only those tiny baby steps that unfold into something greater. And I like say this all the time. I've shared this in another, I think, episode, but it's like I have finally come to believe that because of that activation in my own self. Like I, Maggie, you know this, but it's like in writing this children's book, I wrote like it was in my brain, it was in my like life for 3 years. And in the last year, it's just been in my brain. Like it's been in my brain. And it was like, why didn't I put it down on paper? Like answer that quite like, I don't know, right? Like there was probably some fear. There was probably the fear was if I write it down, another step comes, which is how does it get life? And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, you don't need to answer that question. And so like I was like, you know what? I'm on this plane. I am going to write. I wrote it in a notebook that I had with me. I wrote it all out.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, I put it on, I put it in a Google Doc. I like wrote it. I wrote it, right? And then after that, I was like, okay, so now this is done.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't ever want to forget why I'm inspired. So I'm going to write down why I was inspired. So I wrote like a book inspiration, right? And then I was like, all right, now what? I have no idea what's next. So I was like,
Mm.
you know what? I know I have a friend who wrote a children's book. I'm going to DM her, you know? And I like DM'd her. I said, would you talk to me? Like, haven't talked to you in a while, but like love what you're doing. And we talked. I sent it to 2 people that I knew had done it. One person never responded, and one person responded. And from her, it's like I got more insight, and then I got more insight, and then I got more connections. And it just keeps unfolding. And I still don't know exactly how it's going to be published, because I have 2 places that it could be, right? And I'm learning more and more about the publishing world, and I'm learning more and more about like, what could it look like to market that? Listen,
Mm.
it was also not a part of my 2024 plan or 20, but now it is. And it's like,
Yeah.
it just took the baby contribution, that step. But if I had been stuck in the darkness of the question, the question was, what happens? That
Yeah.
was dark. The light, though, was like, it can happen.
It can
And
happen.
it's just like, do it already. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
do the one thing, like
Yeah.
one thing.
And it's like the book, I've been lucky enough to read it. It's so beautiful. And when you first sent it to me, I was just like, again, like you have this effortless. You and I were like voice noting about this, but it just like I didn't know. I mean, you probably told me, but I was like 3 years. Like it just felt like you were like, oh yeah, I just wrote this book. Like you had this like effortless thing about it, but obviously it's not, right? So like that's an assumption someone could make. Like this book gets published, someone looks to you and they're like, oh, but it's like no, like this is something that's been with me for a very long time. So it's important for people to hear that story, but it's also important for people to read the book. Like you not doing it is a disservice. And like that's a bigger thing that I was like, because I was like, I want my nieces to read this. Like, I want other kids to read it. Like, it serves, like, it not only just because it aligns with my deeper, like, values in life, but it's just a beautiful story. And it, that's another thing that I think is important about being yourself, like, trusting in yourself. Like, that was just, like, being able to do some of the things that we just came here to do. Like, it's not just about us and like us feeling good and us understanding ourselves. Like, it does when you make the conscious effort and when you make the choice to put your energy into things that are more of light nature, that are more of positive nature, like it has a ripple effect on humanity and the world around you, no matter like what you think. But like the acts of courage, right? The creative arts, like the creative expression, like the passion and the love that exists within form now, like because it like when I read the book it just felt like love, so it just came from love and now it exists in form as love, right? And that's so beautiful to have like form like that can then be shared and spread, and it's just going to spread love and joy and kindness, and like that's a
Mm.
beautiful thing. And at the end of the day, like that's what this human experience, like if we so choose, can be about.
Yeah. And that's why, and I love that you're always, I loved that you were able to, you read it and you had like that feeling from it. And I almost, have recognized and have given made way for like what needs to occur from me, what needs to be created from me that is not only mine. Like and that's where I'm like starting to see that in this book and its message. I mean, that's why it's important to me, because I finally, what you always remind me, where it's like people need that. Like you remind me that in many different ways that I show up to create. You're like, people need that. And I often forget because I'm like living in this, I'm living, like I'm living my life. Um, and I have a lot of components to my life. And so it's like that sometimes I do forget, like, I forget the act of creation is like about me and about everybody else that can come into contact with my creative act. And it's important. So you're a great reminder for me in every way. And for one of the first times, like I can see how important it is to give life to this creative act, like beyond me. Like it's so funny because it's like, I don't really I have everything and nothing to do with it. Like it's such the only way I can describe it is that everything and nothing to do with it. It's my interpretation of love. Absolutely, of like love for self and connection to self, and like there's just it is just love, and I've created it from love. I will share it from love. It will not look to me like something that, but I cannot describe it as anything else. Like I really cannot. And that's why when you're saying there's effortlessness in it, there was effortlessness in it. Like while it took a while for me to grab hold and have the courage, 100%, that's true. But the effortlessness of it is because like it is something that is beyond me. And it's mine in that I wrote it. It's not mine in that it like belongs to everyone. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's like a
Yeah.
message that belongs to everyone and
Yeah.
everyone can find themselves in.
Yeah. It's so beautiful to hear you say that. It's just because even I was just thinking about like a year ago. Yeah, it's just nice to see you say that because it's true, and I think that creativity in general, kind of when you do something right, like the ways that like the action. I feel like the art, like the act of just sitting down and again allowing yourself to either get out of your own way, but to still express parts of you, like that's another piece of like growth, right? Like that's another part of this like human journey or human experience, right? It's like that is living. Like, you know, and it's like that is just like being a person, living, experiencing, expressing, trying new things. And we make it so complicated sometimes, a lot of the time. But yeah, I don't know. It's been cool to watch and I'm happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I am. This has been so helpful to even see that journey, this conversation, and like just noticing the process has been, and reflecting on that. I guess noticing through reflection here and how beautiful, like,
Mm,
it's giving me a lot of energy and fuel to like power that even more and also make some decisions which kind of are at the fore soon about it, you know?
mm. Yeah, exciting. Well, we look forward to what's next.
Yes, absolutely. So, anything else for the good of the order in this conversation?
I know, we just got going. I enjoyed this. Yeah, this is our only, as of right now, we only have one duo planned for this season because there's many, many awesome stories that we are excited to share that we've already recorded and that we have in the book. So this is our only duo, but this felt good. And is there anything else that's on your mind?
No, I feel complete. I think it's such a nice bridge to like where we've gone and where we've been and where we're going and where we are right now.
Yeah, more to
Well,
come.
thank you.
Thank
More to come, surely. I have to say that. There's never going to be a lack of stuff that we're going to share. So, all right. Well, thank you, Maggie.
thank you.
Thank you, noticers, for listening, and we will catch you for the next episode. And looking forward to it.